Hi guys, so my recording got cut off, so I'm going to pick up right here where I left off in my previous recording. And so this is a continuation of our lesson from today. If you guys were not able to make it to the lesson, or if you just want to review, this is a great way to do that. So we ended in the last video by looking at this row right here with 1 and -6. So remember, the first thing that we need to do is determine what our inequality should be. So I'm asking myself, is 1 larger than 6 or is -6, or is -6 larger than 1? And I know that 1 is greater than -6. So I'm going to put an inequality symbol in that shows that 1 is greater than -6. So the point of my inequality symbol is pointing to the right to say that 1 is greater than -6. Okay, now the operation that they ask us to carry out is to divide both of these numbers by 1/2. So I am going to divide 1 by 1/2, but I'm going to keep my inequality symbol the same for now until I know for sure whether or not I need to change it. So I'm going to come over here and remind you guys, remember that we have 1 over 1 right now, and it's being divided by 1 over 2. Now, when we divide fractions, we flip the second fraction. So 1 over 2, and we multiply. So multiplied by 2 over 1. So now we have 2 over 2, and 2 over 2, no, I'm sorry, I did that incorrectly. I'm sorry. This is 1. I knew I did that incorrectly. Okay, so this is actually 1 over 1, and we multiply, and so we get 2 over 1. And so when we divide 1 by 1/2, we end up with 2. So we have 2 on this side of our inequality. Now let's do -6, -6 over 1 divided by 1/2. Remember, we're going to flip that second fraction so that we are multiplying. So we're going to flip it. So I end up with -12. So on this side of my inequality, I've got -12. Now I have to ask myself, is 2 still larger than -12? And indeed it is. So that means I'm going to keep my inequality symbol the same and say 2 is greater than -12. That makes that a true statement. So my inequality symbol was preserved. So I'm going to add that in there. All right. Now let's look at 3 and -3. So I'm asking myself, which one is larger, 3 or -3? And I know that 3 is larger. So I'm going to say 3 is greater than -3. And now they're asking me to multiply both sides of my inequality by 3. So I'm going to multiply 3 by 3. And I'm going to leave my inequality symbol in there, the greater than. And on the other side of my inequality, I'm going to multiply -3 by 3. And you're remembering that a negative times a positive is a negative. So 3 times 3 is 9. And -3 times 3 is -9. So now I have to ask myself, is 9 still larger than -9? And indeed it is. So I can keep that inequality symbol the same, and I can say that it is preserved. So the inequality symbol is preserved. So after having gone through and multiplied or divided by positive numbers, we've come to another property of inequalities. We can say that when both numbers being compared are multiplied or divided by a positive number, the symbol stays the same, and that means that that inequality symbol is preserved. So I'm going to say, when we multiply or divide by a positive number, the symbol stays the same. And when we say that the symbol stays the same, we mean that that symbol is preserved. So I'm going to write that down here, preserved. That's the word we're using to say that that inequality symbol is staying the same. It's not changing. We don't have to turn a greater than into a less than. It's staying as a greater than. So we're going to take a look at a different operation to see what our fourth property of inequality is. So I just want to remind you guys before we move on that firstly, when we add or subtract, it's preserved. The inequality symbol is preserved. When we multiply by -1, it is reversed. And finally, right now, when we multiply or divide by a positive, it is preserved. Those are the three properties of inequalities that we know so far. So we're going to look at a fourth property of inequality right now. Now we are seeing what happens when we multiply or divide by a negative number. How is that going to affect our inequality symbol? So the first thing that I'm going to do is look at this, and I'm asking myself, is -5 less than or greater than 2? And I know that -5 is less than 2. So I'm going to put a less than inequality symbol in there. And my operation that this is asking me to do is multiply by -3. So on the left side, I'm going to multiply -5 by -3. And on the right side, and I'm keeping my inequality symbol the same, on the right side, I'm multiplying 2 by -3. So when I carry out these operations, or when I carry out this operation, remember that a negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative times a positive is a negative. All right. So we have on the left side, -5 times -3, which is positive 15. And on the right side, we have 2 times -3, which is -6. So now I have to ask myself, can I still say that 15 is less than, because that's what my inequality symbol said right here, is less than. Can I still say that 15 is less than -6? No, I can't. 15 is greater than -6. So I need to change that inequality symbol from a less than sign to a greater than sign, meaning that my inequality symbol was reversed. It was reversed. Okay, let's take a look at the next row down. Now we're asking, is -4 greater than or less than -1? So -4, I know, is less than -1. So I'm going to put a less than symbol in there to make that a true statement. And now it's asking me to divide both sides of my inequality by -2. So I'm going to write that out. -4 divided by -2. And I'm going to leave that inequality symbol in there. -1 divided by -2. Okay, remember, when we have a negative divided by a negative, it equals a positive. And when we have a negative divided by a positive, it equals a negative. All right, so -4 divided by -2 is the same thing as saying 4 divided by 2. And I know that 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now, -1 divided by -2 is going to stay 1/2. So now I have to ask myself, can I still say that 2 is less than 1/2? And I can't say that anymore. So I need to change my inequality symbol from a less than to a greater than. So that means that my inequality symbol was reversed. So I'm going to write that in there. Okay, now I'm looking at the next row down, and it is asking me to compare -3 and 6. So I know that -3 is less than 6. So I'm going to draw an inequality symbol in there to show that -3 is less than 6. Now it's asking me to divide by -1/2. So I'm going to write -3 divided by -1/2. And I'm still going to leave the less than in there. 6 divided by -1/2. Okay, now referring to over here, remember that a negative divided by a negative is a positive, and a negative divided by a positive is a negative. So we have -3 over 1, and we're dividing that by -1/2. So remember, that means that we have -3 over 1, and we're going to multiply that by -2 over 1. So we have 6 over 1 now, and so we can write that as 6. So we have 6 on the left side of our inequality, and now we have to figure out the right side. On the right side, we have 6 over 1 divided by -1/2. So we are going to write that as 6 over 1 multiplied by -2 over 1. And that means that that side is -12. So I've got -12. I'm sorry, guys, I did that incorrectly. I did that very incorrectly. Let's try that again. Let me rewrite that. I did something wrong. No, I'm sorry. I wrote it wrong in my notes. So let me rewrite that again. So I've got 6 over 1 divided by negative 1 over 2. Whoops, still got my eraser. Divided by negative 1 over 2. So I'm going to change that to 6 over 1 multiplied by negative 2 over 1. So that equals negative 12. So on this side, it's negative 12. Okay, so now I have to ask myself, is 6 greater than negative 12? And indeed it is. So I need to change my inequality sign to a greater than symbol from a less than symbol because 6 is greater than negative 12. And I need that to be a true statement. All right. Let's look now at the last row in this station 4. So now I need to ask myself, is negative 6 greater than or less than 1? And I know that negative 6 is less than 1, so I'm going to put a less than symbol in there. And this is asking us to multiply by negative 1/2. So negative 6 times negative 1/2, and I'm going to leave that less than in there. 1 times negative 1/2. Okay, so 6 times 1/2 is 3 because 6 divided by 2 is 3, so positive 3 here. And then we have, we're not going to change our symbol yet, so we've got 1 times negative 1/2, and that is negative 1/2. So we have negative 1/2 on this side of our inequality. Now we have to ask ourselves, is 3 still less than negative 1/2? And it's not. 3 is greater than negative 1/2. So I had to reverse, I reversed my inequality. So let's look at this in total. Let's look at the property that we can say that this is. So what we are understanding is when we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to change our inequality symbol. It is reversed. So we're going to say when we multiply or divide by a negative number, the sign changes. And remember that when the sign changes, we call it reversed. All right, so now I'm going to erase this stuff on the side right here. We have 4 properties of inequality that we can use. So remember, the first property of inequality is we can add or subtract numbers, and our inequality symbol is preserved. The second one is when we multiply by negative 1, our inequality symbol is reversed. It changes. Number 3, when we multiply or divide by a positive number, the inequality symbol is preserved. And then number 4, when we multiply or divide by a negative number, that inequality symbol is reversed. So we have 4 properties of inequality here that are telling us whether that inequality symbol is going to be reversed or preserved. So we're going to keep those in mind going forward as we answer the questions in the exercises. So moving on, we are going to look at 4 exercises today before I set you guys free to do your problem set and exit ticket. And I actually didn't go through all of these exercises in the actual lesson, so this might be really helpful for you guys right now for your homework. All right, so what they're doing is they're giving us an inequality. They already gave us a true statement. So our true statement is 2 is less than 5. That's true. In this first column here, they're asking us to write a new inequality that will preserve that inequality symbol. So on the side here, I'm going to write preserve. And over here, I'm going to write reverse. just to give us a little bit easier of a time figuring this out. Okay, so we have two of each. There are two properties of inequality for each preserving and reversing our inequality symbol. Okay, so on the preserved side, we know that we can add or subtract and our inequality symbol will be preserved. And we can also multiply or divide by a positive number. Over here, for reversed, we can multiply by -1 and it will be reversed. Or we can multiply or divide by a negative number and it will be reversed. It doesn't matter which. So we have these two ideas here, which will be really good for us because we want to be able to either keep or change our inequality symbol and then give an explanation for it. So here's what we're going to do. So 2 is less than 5. We want to keep that inequality symbol the same. We want to preserve it. So we're going to come over here and look at our preserved column. We can either add or subtract a number to both sides of our inequality, or we can multiply or divide both sides of our inequality by a positive number. So we're going to choose to multiply by 2, which is a positive number. So that means that we have 2 multiplied by 2 is less than 5 multiplied by 2. So when we carry out those operations, we end up with 2 times 2 is 4, is still less than 5 times 2, which is 10. So we preserved that inequality symbol. It stayed the same. And so I'm going to write P for preserved right here. And we're going to put number 2. We're going to say that this is the second explanation because we can multiply or divide by a positive number and that inequality symbol will remain the same. Let's look at the second one. It wants us to reverse that inequality symbol. It wants us to change that inequality symbol. So I'm going to look over here to the right side where I wrote reversed. I can either multiply by -1 or I can multiply or divide by a negative number. So I'm going to choose to multiply by -2. So that means that I have 2 times -2. And I'm going to leave that inequality symbol the same. So I'm going to say it's less than for now. 5 times -2. Okay, remember a negative times a positive is a negative. So 2 times -2 is -4. And 5 times -2 is -10. So now I have to ask myself, I should be able to reverse this. And I can confidently make a true statement that says that -4 is greater than -10. So for reversed here, I'm going to put number 2 because my second explanation on the right side of my screen is an explanation for reversing that inequality symbol. Now, let's look at the second row down. It says -4 is greater than -6. That's a true statement. In this second column, we want to keep it a true statement. So this time we're going to use the first preserved property, and we're going to add 2 to both sides. So now we have -4 plus 2 is greater than -6 plus 2. And if we carry out these operations, -4 plus 2 is -2, which is still greater than -6 plus 2, which is -4. So that is still a true statement. So over here, I'm going to write P for preserved, and the explanation for preserving that inequality symbol is number 1 over here for preserved. Let's look at, so for the second or the third column over from the left, we want to reverse that inequality symbol. So this time I'm going to multiply by -1, and that's going to reverse that inequality symbol. So -4 times -1, I'm going to keep my inequality symbol the same, greater than, -6 times -1. Okay, so -4 times -1 is 4. And negative 6 times negative 1 is 6. So I can no longer say that 4 is greater than 6 because it's really less than 6. So the reason or my explanation is number 1 on my reserved side. Let's look at negative 1 is less than or equal to 2. So for our first column, we need to be able to preserve that inequality symbol. So for this one, I'm going to use subtraction. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So I've got negative 1 minus negative 3. No, negative 1 minus 3. Don't get confused. Negative 1 minus 3. Okay. Whoops. No, that's not what I want to do here. I'm sorry, guys. I read my notes wrong. Okay. So I want to divide both sides by 2. Okay. I'm going to actually write that by. Divide by 2. All right. So now I have negative 1 divided by 2. And I'm going to leave that less than or equal to 2 divided by 2. Okay. So when I divide negative 1 by 2, I still get negative 1 over 2. And when I divide 2 by 2, I get 1. And I can still say that negative 1/2 is less than or equal to 1. So for my preserved, I'm going to use number 2 on my preserved side as my explanation. Okay, let's look at reserved. We're trying to reserve that less than or equal to symbol. We're trying to change it to a greater than or equal to symbol. So now I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. So now I have negative 1 divided by negative 2 is less than or equal to 2 divided by negative 2. So I'm left with 1/2 and negative 1. And I have to change that because 1/2 is greater than or equal to negative 1. So for my reserved symbol on my reserved side, I'm going to use my explanation of number 2 because I'm dividing by a negative number and that's going to change my inequality symbol. So we're keeping these in mind as we do this last one, okay? Negative 2 plus negative 3 is less than negative 3 minus 1. So first let's carry out this inequality. Negative 2 plus negative 3 is negative 5, and negative 3 minus 1 is negative 4. And it's a true statement to say negative 5 is less than negative 4. So we're happy with that. So remember, we're trying to preserve in this column right here, and we're trying to reverse in this column right here, and we're looking for an explanation in this one right here. Okay, explanation, that's not right. Explanation. Okay, so for this one, when I'm trying to reserve it, I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. So now I have negative 5 minus 3 is less than negative 4 minus 3. So over here I can say negative 8 because negative 5 minus 3 is negative 8 is less than negative 7 because negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. So I preserved that inequality symbol. I didn't need to change it at all. For the reverse, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 1/2. And when I do that, I get negative 5 times negative 1/2 is less than negative 4 times negative 1/2. Okay, when I multiply negative 5 over 1 by negative 1 over 2, I get 5 over 2. So we've got 5 over 2 right here. And when I multiply negative 4 over 1 by negative 1/2, I get 4 over 2, which is 2. Okay, so now I have 5 over 2 on one side and 2 on the other. So I'm going to divide 2 by 5 and see what I get. So 2 goes into 5 4 times. Okay, so minus 4. No, 2 goes into 5 2 times. So minus 4, that leaves me with 1. I'm going to put a decimal here. I'm going to drop down a 0. 2 goes into 10 5 times. Minus 10, that equals 0. So this is really 2.5 and 2. And I can't say that 2.5 is less than 2 because 2.5 is greater than 2. So my explanation for preserving, if we go back, I subtracted -3, so that was that was number 1. And for reversing, I multiplied by -1/2, so that was number 2. So that is how we complete those problems. And you guys are going to see some things similar to this in your homework, but they're going to tell you the operation that you need to carry out. And then you're going to say whether the inequality symbol was preserved or reversed. So in this last slide that I have here for you guys, I want to just review what we just covered. So when both sides of an inequality are added or subtracted by a number, the inequality symbol stays the same, and the inequality symbol, if it's staying the same, is said to be preserved. Okay? When both sides of an inequality are multiplied or divided by a positive number, the inequality stays the same, and the inequality symbol is said to be preserved. And then finally, when both sides of the inequality are multiplied or divided by a negative number, the inequality switches, and so the inequality symbol is said to be reversed. So there are our 4 properties of inequality for you guys, and you're going to use those properties in your homework. Please email me if you have any questions. Your homework and exit ticket are posted on Google Classroom. They'll take you to a link on GoFormative to complete those, and you just need to edit the background. Thank you, guys.